Sago, I'm Dale Montour. There are approximately 35,000 Aboriginal people living in the city of Antuher. When they leave their communities to come here, they face unemployment, poor housing, and inadequate services. But the Aboriginal community here has rallied together to alleviate some of these problems. There are over 50 different organizations set up to assist these people in any way that they can. One of these organizations is the United Native Nations, a non-profit society established to create employment, training, and economic opportunities. I spoke to the president, Ron George.
The United Native Nations has been in existence since 1976. Its predecessor, the BC Association of Non-Status Indians, was incorporated in 1969. The UNN represents approximately 60,000 Aboriginal people from all of British Columbia, who are non-status, off-reserve, and Métis. These are the Aboriginal people who have no political voice on matters affecting their lives, and it is the United Native Nations' job to represent and protect them. Ron George has been president since July of 1985.
We're a political liaison for all of our members, whether it's municipal, provincial, or federal, but primarily we're dealing with delivery of programs and services which meet the immediate needs of the off-reserve populations. We find that we have to pay more attention to this area because no one else is. The province takes no jurisdiction over off-reserve peoples, nor does the federal government. It's a constitutional political football, so off-reserve people fall through the cracks when it comes to programs and services, so we're developing them on our own.
According to a 1986 census, there were 255,000 off-reserve status Indians, 250,000 non-status Indians living off the reserve, and 250,000 to 300,000 Métis in Canada. 305,000 Indians lived on reserve and had status. The federal government only exercises its fiduciary responsibility over those Indians who have status and live on the reserve. That responsibility translates into training and economic development programs, housing, education, medical, and social services. So what all this means is that the basic necessities of life have been denied to the majority of Aboriginal people in Canada. Groups like the United Native Nations decided that it was time to make sure that these people finally received proper care with very little help or involvement from government.
We do it by way of earning our funding through fee-for-service contracts as opposed to getting outright grants. So we think that we're as close to self-government as we can possibly be off reserve because we're earning our money that we spend on programs and services. And I think that's what the UNN is most proud of, is that we've become basically self-sufficient.
Ron, what do you mean by fee-for-service contracts?
We deliver a service, for instance, with CMHC, Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and what we do is we do all the paperwork, we go out and search out the clients and so forth, and for all of the work we do, we get paid, as they would anyone else that would do the contracts for them. And that's turned into a partnership arrangement with Central Mortgage and Housing, where we're not adversaries anymore, we're partners. And we get a fairly good return on our work. There's no grants involved. We get paid for the work we do. We deliver in a neighborhood of 100 to 150 housing units a year through the program. And in addition to that, which something that I'm very proud of, is that we also deliver to about 80 bands for the residential rehabilitation assistance program that's on reserve. So that's extra to what we do with CMHC, and those are the manners in which we work on a fee-for-service basis.
The United Native Nations didn't stop with housing. They are involved in education and manage scholarships for students who are classed as non-status Indians. They were the first to help Native war veterans of BC seek redress for benefits they never received, as well as helping them gain recognition for their contributions in the wars. The UNN has staff who help educate and assist Aboriginal individuals and families entitled to reinstatement of their status under Bill C-31. They set up the first ever Aboriginal Personnel Services Agency, and they have a crisis intervention and referral center to deal with housing shortages, physical or sexual abuse, child apprehension, suicide, and alcohol and drug abuse. The list is endless.
Right now we're managing $1.5 million Environmental Youth Corps program, which is a provincial make work project for youth and the environment. And, they consist of 5 crew members and 1 supervisor, and that's working pretty well for us because we're able to train supervisors and managers who can move on to bigger things later on, and it's getting the youth involved in environment, which is something that we can support because that's what our life is dependent on, is the survival of the environment. So we feel good about managing that program.
A lot of Aboriginal people that the UNN and other groups serve are those with status, but who have decided to live away from their communities. But the situation for a lot of communities is as dismal or worse than in the city. So a lot of them did move, looking for better employment and economic opportunities. But is moving to the city the solution? Shouldn't improving the economic situation in the communities be the focus?
No, it's not the solution, but there really isn't much opportunity to do anything until the federal and provincial governments start dealing with the land claim situation. Because you need resources to develop before you can create jobs and create an economy. So I think what we've been going through in the last 20 years is development stages of our politics and our lobby ability and so on, and I think the next generation will be prepared to deal with the land claims and the resource development that we've been striving for. So I'm depending on the next generation to start developing these jobs that'll keep the kids at home.
Why do you think that the federal and provincial governments are not dealing with the land claim situation?
Well, it's a matter of money. The provincial governments have within their jurisdiction the lands inside their boundaries, with the exception of some federal lands. And the federal government has a fiduciary responsibility for Aboriginal people, which they narrow down to status Indian people. And the Constitution process, where we're trying to define our rights in Section 35, enhances that political football syndrome. And so while they're arguing of whose jurisdiction it is, we're out here trying to survive and falling between the cracks. So it's a matter of money.
The motto for the organization is working together for our children. Why did you choose that?
Well, it's basically the Indian philosophy. We work for the next generation. And it's one I think society in general should take as their slogan, because if we knew what we were leaving for our children, if we thought in those terms, we sure wouldn't be destroying the land the way we are with clear cuts and all the pollution. And some of our children will never see what we saw. You know, I grew up looking at moose outside my window and catching fish just outside my door in the river, and I doubt very much whether my grandchildren will be able to experience that. So my job is, as a hereditary chief now, is to try and preserve some of that and give the message to the general public that we've got to look after our future if we want to be self-sufficient, or if we want to save this planet. So working together for our children is apropos.
In any society that you can think of anywhere in the world, women are at the bottom of the rung, economically, politically, and socially. Add to that the fact that you're an Aboriginal woman and your situation worsens.
I think just in looking back, I think most women who come to the city usually find themselves at the bottom of the economic level. You know, it's really hard. I mean, I expect most women do end up being on social assistance when they first come to the city.
Aboriginal women taking care of their own. Next on Aboriginal Voices.
Where we are prepared to accept and deal with that and go past that. And the only way that we can really do that is through healing.
Another one of the association's projects is the recruiting of Native foster parents. The experience of not growing up with their own people, void of Native culture, has had a devastating effect on some Aboriginal children. So the association fundraised and produced their own video. It's called Taking Care of Our Own.
There are children who, for various reasons, must live apart from their families. Taking Care of Our Own is a video intended to encourage Native people to become foster parents. Our children need nurturing, support, and love. They also need their culture.
In the past, our Native people have always looked after their own. I like to tell my story in the way our Native people did their fostering many years ago. When a parent took sick, or even died giving birth, there was always a relative who readily accepted the child as her own.
Gloria and her two co-workers have high expectations of PNWA. Next on the agenda is the creation of a women's center which would take care of the needs of women in all sectors of the Aboriginal community. Under the same roof as the Professional Native Women's Association, you will find Urban Images, a pre-employment training and support program for Native women. I spoke with the employment facilitator, Diana Day.
Urban Images is a pre-employment training program for Native women, and we have 20 women in program. We run 2 programs a year, and they're 23 weeks in length, each program. We have part of the program is in class, and the other part is a work experience for the women. We do life skills, career planning, pre-employment training, job search techniques, those kinds of things.
Most of the Native women who come to the city are young women without any formal education, and for the most part, they don't have the skills needed to go out and get a job. The program that Urban Images offers tries to deal specifically with all of the issues a young woman seeking employment might face, and there are many.
Barriers to employment for Native women that we've had come to our program here are daycare, housing, not having a family support system to encourage them to continue, to not having the connection to the resources that are available in the city, not seeing what other kinds of barriers. Transportation is sometimes a barrier. The low wage, I think, too, is another thing. Here in British Columbia, our minimum wage is $5 an hour, which is very, very minimum. And it's not a much incentive for women to, continue on to go with the cost of employment, because there are costs to being employed. You have to pay for clothes, a wardrobe. You have to have money for lunches, money for transportation, and then money for daycare. It's a big expense, and on $5 an hour, it's not worth it to a lot of women. It's not much incentive to get out and to break out. So here we work with the women in building their self-esteem, their self-confidence, and giving them the skills that are necessary to find work, giving them the connections, giving them the power to do their own job search, showing them the skills that are necessary, and support them. The program's been very successful. In the past 8 years, we've had
over 240 women graduate from the program and go on to other things. We had women employed in the banking industry and with going to small business development, going to alcohol and drug counseling, and just a number of things, accounting, computer consultants, go on to university nursing program, and so on. It's just a great, it's really nice to be a part of it and to see the women when they first come into the program and the development, the personal growth of the women is just, it's beautiful. It's really good to see, and it's really good to be a part of that.
With over 50 Aboriginal organizations in the Lower Mainland, each with its own mandate, it was felt that a coordinating body should be established. The Urban Society was formed to ensure that there was no duplication or overlap of services and to act as a communications network. It's the first of its kind in the country, and it's a model that works. Nelson Mayer is the president.
Well, initially, when Urban was first discussed amongst the community members who were planning it, and there were a number of different groups that were involved in the initial stages, there was discussion about the need of greater communication between the organizations. And there were a lot of information needs that people had. There were discussions about various programs that were being developed in the community, and no one seemed to have really a clear idea of what everyone was doing, who was doing what, and who was ultimately responsible. So the discussion began about forming initially an organization that would be not an umbrella organization in terms of a governing body and making policies or setting any type of dictations down to the organizations, but rather an organization that would provide for greater opportunities for networking, greater opportunities for sharing of information, and a greater opportunity for coordination of service delivery. And so that initially was the Urban mandate, and that's basically how it remained and how it's being developed.
Nelson is also the executive director of the United Native Nations, and his dual leadership is an indication of just how closely all of the Native organizations in the city of Vancouver work together. The UNN, Urban Images, and the Professional Native Women's Association were three of the founding groups of the Urban Society.
I think the government is, I think they're of two minds. First off, they're pleased that there is an organization that, you know, is connected to all of the other organizations, but I think government is liking the concept in terms of, and it's what I spoke about earlier about that dictatorship role or that government body, and they see, and they would like, I believe, Urban to be developed as being that, you know, body that speaks for all the urban Aboriginal groups, and I am being very candid with the government and saying, no, we're not an umbrella organization. We do not interfere with the individual mandates. We do not dictate to them. And if your intentions are to utilize Urban in this fashion, then that would destroy Urban, because the groups recognize that they have a certain amount of autonomy with respect to their mandates and how they wish to function in delivering the services. And being connected to Urban is a plus, but if Urban suddenly began trying to wield some type of big stick and say, this is how you are going to operate, and you're not going to get any money unless you have Urban support, then we just tear ourselves apart.
All of the Aboriginal organizations we've highlighted, and those we couldn't, have as their sole mandate the protection of Aboriginal rights and freedoms for those people whom the governments themselves still haven't recognized. They stand as an example to governments that with caring and ingenuity, anything can be accomplished.
That's our program for this week. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dale Montour, Onigiwahi, Zago de Dese.